Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Climate Action Fortnight. My name is Amy Peace, and I'm a project officer working in environmental education at Leicester City Council. And behind the scenes today, we have my colleague Lee Jowett, who is the Sustainable Schools Coordinator. So we hope that you had a really great weekend, maybe putting into practice what you learned last week. And today we are on day 6, which we will be looking at our marine topic today. We have some very great speakers coming up, and if you'd like to take part in our activities today, if you head over to the extranet, you'll find some great resources about marine conservation and plastic pollution. So I think without further ado, I'll introduce the first of our speakers today. So we have Alex Cameron, who is a flood risk engineer at Leicester City Council. Alex, are you there?
Good morning, everybody. I'll just share the presentation with you all and then we'll go through. So good morning, everybody. And welcome to day number 6. And as Amy has quite rightly introduced, I am a flood risk engineer and I work for Leicester City Council. And I'm going to give you a brief introduction today about the impacts of climate change on both our marine and river environments and the impact that that's going to have on flood risk. So we're going to specifically talk about flood risk today. But I think the first thing that's very important is to understand what climate change is, because we hear a lot about it and not a lot of people always quite understand what it is. And what climate change is, it's the long-term change in weather patterns across the world. And this is a natural process that happens over time. However, we as humans, since about the 1800s, which is the Industrial Revolution, we've been releasing lots and lots and ever increasing amounts of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into our atmosphere. And as a result, it's having a dramatic impact on our global temperatures. We're speeding up the process at which climate change is occurring. And so we are having quite an adverse impact on our wider environment, not just our local environments. And this is due to the greenhouse effect. So, as I've said, this is a natural process. And what happens, radiation from the sun comes to Earth, it goes through our atmosphere, and it's reflected off the surface of our Earth. And then within our atmosphere, we have naturally occurring greenhouse gases. They allow some of that heat to be retained within the atmosphere, and that's what heats our planet. And some of it escapes into space. But the problem that we have is that because we're putting more and more and more greenhouse gases into our atmosphere, we're enhancing this greenhouse effect. And as a result, the amount of heat that stays within the atmosphere is getting larger and larger and increasing. So that means that the overall temperature of the planet is increasing. So this is also having negative impacts on our natural processes. And one of the key processes that I'd like to talk to you today about is the water cycle. And normally what happens, again, we have the sun's radiation, it hits our seas and our oceans, and it allows some of that water to evaporate. It turns into gas, and that raises up into our atmosphere. And as we raise up into the atmosphere, obviously temperatures get colder, and that gas eventually turns into clouds. And because our Earth spins and because we have wind on our planet, these clouds eventually move from across the sea over to our land. And as we move over the land, these clouds get pushed up, and that causes the temperature to cool further, and eventually these clouds will rain. And what we call rain or snow or sleet is precipitation, and essentially it means that water is coming back down to Earth, whether that's in the form of snow or whether that's in the form of water. And through gravity, eventually all water, whether it's on the surface of the Earth or whether it's through in the ground, eventually returns to our streams, which go to our rivers, which then go back to our sea. And the process continues forever and ever. But because we're increasing the temperature through the greenhouse effect and all those emissions that we put into the atmosphere, we're speeding this process up, and it's getting more and more extreme, which means the rain clouds get bigger, the storms get bigger, and the amount of water that hits our ground at any one time becomes much, much larger. And as a result, our rivers get filled quicker. But that's the cycle of the water. But we're also having a really negative effect on the way water behaves in our urban environments. And the first thing is, if we just look at the left of the screen, we can see if we had a lovely green natural area, when it does rain, that rain hits the ground, approximately half of it soaks into the ground. And about 40% of it, that goes back into the atmosphere because of the heat. And only about 10% actually runs across the land and goes into our rivers, which doesn't seem like a lot. But then when we look at our urban environments where we live in our towns and our cities, we're building lots of impermeable surfaces. And by impermeable, it means materials which water cannot go through. So we're thinking like the tarmac on our roads, the concrete in our buildings. We're extending and removing our gardens to make bigger houses. Well, that has a different impact on our water and the way it behaves. So if we look at the right hand side of the diagram, we can see that only maybe 10 to 15% of that water now can get into the ground, and only 30% of it goes back into the atmosphere. So over half of all the water we generate, or that is occurs in our urban environments, ends up going back into our rivers. So essentially our rivers fill up 5 times faster. And this is because we have designed our urban environments. Not only are they impermeable, but we've designed them to so efficiently move water away from our towns and into rivers. So I'm sure, as you're all aware, we'll have seen drains in our street. And our drains connect to our sewers, which outfall into our rivers. So as soon as that water hits our urban area, it's running off down our streets and it's going into these drains, it's going into our sewers, and it's very quickly getting into our rivers. So not only do we increase the amount of water that enters our rivers, we increase the speed at which the water enters our rivers, and that can have quite a lot of impacts. And because our rivers and seas are all intrinsically connected, water generated in our urban areas, in areas like Leicester, which couldn't be further away from the sea or our oceans, do all contribute to wider impacts in both our rivers and our marine environments. So just thinking about the impacts of climate change, there's quite a lot. First of all, we're rising our temperatures. It is getting hotter. And as a result, that's leading to our ice caps are melting, which is leading to sea level rise, but it is also leading to more frequent intense weather, which means our rivers are rising and the extremeness of storms is getting larger. And also we see swinging weather. It goes from very wet to very hot rather than a little bit wet and warm. And this is having really big impacts. Our oceans are acidifying, and I'm sure some of our other presenters might talk about this in a bit more detail later. But from my perspective, the real big issue that we're having from a marine environment is these more extreme storms are leading to bigger waves, and bigger waves are hitting our coasts, leading to more flooding, and they're eroding our coasts, as you can see here in the top left. And the defences that we might have built to defend from flooding of that nature from these big waves are just not good enough anymore. And unfortunately, that means we're failing to protect ourselves from flooding. Also, our rivers are filling up quicker, and that's flooding our towns and cities as well. So we're increasing flood risk from all sources. And not only does this impact us as humans, it has a massive impact on our wider environment, our plants and our animals that live here in our environment with us. And overall, we're really just increasing flood risk. And I've got a lovely little graphic just to give you some numbers. You know, about 47% of our glaciers in the world have melted or are undergoing extreme melting. Overall temperatures are up by 28%. You know, we've lost over nearly 1 million species in terms of our genetic diversity. We're having really big impacts on sea level, the amount of radiation, and our vegetation cover. So going back to flooding, what does that mean? You know, quite a lot of people may never have been flooded and don't understand. Well, there's quite a lot of forms of flooding. You know, as you can see here on the right, we've got big waves. That's from our marine environment and our coasts. Storms are making waves bigger. We have in the middle here flooding from our rivers. The amount of water, as I've told you, is entering our rivers quicker and in larger volumes, causing them to burst and flood more frequently and flood places that were once never flooded. We also have sewers in our towns and our cities, and these only have a certain capacity, and like rivers, once they're full they burst too, so water can come out of places we never expected in our urban environments. All those manholes in the road can suddenly start bursting and flooding quite some distance away from a river. And also we have surface water flooding, which is just because we've built these impermeable surfaces during really intense rainfall, because it can't enter the ground, it flows to all our low spots. So we've got flooding from 4 different points, all increasing in frequency and magnitude because of climate change. So what are the impacts? Well, there's lots and lots of impacts of flooding. I mean, first of all, we can flood our homes. And when you've flooded your home, you can't live in your home anymore. So not only is your house damaged, it has to get repaired and people have to move away. It can take a very long time to return from pre-flood. Some people don't move back to their houses for 1 or 2 years after they've been flooded. Also, thinking about our roads and our wider urban environments, flooding floods our roads means that travel is disrupted. Vehicles can't move, buses can't get around, and that can affect people's jobs and livelihoods, even though they may not have been flooded. And also, there's quite often people will have to be rescued, and sometimes people can't be rescued. And unfortunately, that means that people die because of flooding. And because flooding is getting worse, more and more people are at risk, and the likelihood of people dying is getting higher and higher. So, what are we doing in the UK about this? Well, we've got a lot of really ambitious things that we're trying to do by our government. We're trying to reduce our carbon footprint and go carbon neutral by 2050, meaning that we are not putting in so much carbon dioxide into our atmosphere, and hopefully we should start being able to reverse global temperature rises. We're looking at introducing electrical vehicles, and there's big money being made available for new flood risk management projects, particularly those that are reflections of nature, called natural flood risk management, trying to go back to systems that have worked throughout nature and throughout history, allowing the river to flood but controlling where that river floods, allowing our coasts to flood but thinking about where naturally those can flood whilst protecting people. But is this enough? And the answer is no, really, because that's national, that's thinking across the country, but we need to think local. And Leicester City Council and a lot of people who lived in Leicester were really unhappy about the impact that we're having on our climate. And in 2019, in February, led by Councillor Clark and supported by our city mayor here, we declared a climate emergency in Leicester. And we've developed the Climate Action Plan, which sets out a series of goals and objectives that we'll be working together with ourselves, everybody who lives in Leicester, to try and become more sustainable and prepare for the impacts of climate change. And that includes managing flood risk that comes from climate change. But the biggest, I think most important part of that is that we're trying to bring nature back into our cities. We're going to create our green connected spaces by introducing those natural systems, our trees and our gardens, and improving these spaces. We can slow the flow of that water. We can reduce the amount that gets in the river. We can stop and reduce the level at which it rises, and hopefully reduce the chance of flooding, not just here in our towns, but downstream, thinking as we get closer to the sea, just reducing those general water levels overall. But I think we also need to inspire other people. We need to be like Greta, and that's where we need you. We need everybody who's watching today to become the new Gretas, to try and make a difference. Think about how you can change perhaps 1 or 2 things in your behaviour to reduce the carbon footprint. Could you think of alternative travel? Could you go on your bike instead of the bus? Or could you walk instead of going in the car? Can you reduce, reuse, recycle? All of those little steps that you could take really do make a big difference if we all start to do that. But also, you can try and take part in exciting and new eco schools projects. So I've just got one that we have developed that I'd like to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about, and that's the Sea Starts Here project. And it looks at the journey that water takes from its start in our urban environments to our seas, and the impacts that plastic pollution and single-use plastics can have on this journey. And more importantly, it's about trying to stop the impact that might have, not only on our rivers, but more importantly in our seas and oceans, because we know all our rivers end up there. So the majority of waste ends up in our oceans. And we can see horrible scenes like this. But the important part about this is if you take part in the Sea Starts Here project, you can contribute to your green flag certification and work with eco schools. And the project, quite simply, is 2 stages. We've got a series of classroom activities, a quiz. We're going to find out where your drainage assets are in your school, and we're going to create awareness posters. And for some lucky students, we're going to get some spray paint out. We're going to create some stencils, and we're going to make people aware that when rain goes down our drain, it enters the sea. And the important thing is we're going to spray these around everywhere and everything in and around our schools. So if that's something that you might want to get involved with, all my details will be available at the end of the presentation, and you can get in contact with me. But I really thank you for your time, and I think we've had a quick run through the impacts of climate change and flood risk, and also the project that we offer. So I look forward to hopefully working with you all very soon. Thank you, everyone.
Brilliant, thank you, Alex. I've actually been reading about rewilding rivers, so that was quite interesting for me. We'll move on to our next speaker now. You may remember her from Friday, but we've got Cassie Kemp, who is a librarian at the Creative Learning Services. So I'll hand straight over to Cassie.
Hello everyone, welcome back. Hope everybody had a good weekend and you're enjoying this so far this morning. I found that really interesting. It was like a science lesson, but a little bit more exciting than that. And I felt like I learned a lot. So hopefully we can put that together. And then I'm going to talk to you about some wonderful books here that are all about different marine issues. Some of them may be a bit for ages a little bit younger than yourselves, but you can look at them and maybe kind of look at them, dissect them and debate about some of the issues that are mentioned, and maybe even share them with younger brothers and sisters and things like that. So don't worry if you look at a book and go, that's not for me. It will be, and there's something at the heart of it that you can really get stuck into and get really passionate about. And like Alex said, be the next Greta, be more Greta. I love that as a concept. So first one I'm going to talk to you about is a book called Where's the Starfish? Now this looks like a really babyish book, and it does have this bit at the beginning where it starts off like it is a look and find book, because it wants us to find the starfish, the jellyfish and the clownfish in each page. But it is such a powerful book. Other than these words, there are no words in the book, but oh my goodness, I'm just going to show you a couple. I can't show you everything, but if you can see from there, we've got all these different all these different fishes and different sea creatures in the ocean, and there's the start of pollution, plastic pollution and all this rubbish and litter from humans in there. And as the book goes on, it gets less, the creatures get less and fewer, and the stuff on this side gets more and more, and it just keeps on going. So it's a really simple way of showing you how we can have that impact on the marine life out there in our seas and our oceans, and you know what we can do about it, because there is a happy ending. There has to be a happy ending. If you like this book, there's also one called Where's the Elephant, and that's all about deforestation as well. Same concept, very simple. It just slowly, we encroach and the animals have to withdraw, and we don't want that to happen. So that is Where's the Starfish. And then book number 2, I like this mostly because of the name of the character. So we have Somebody Swallowed Stanley. This is a book about a plastic bag. We don't get many books about plastic bags, do we? We really definitely don't. So Stanley is the plastic bag. You can see him there. He's all nice and stripy, like the kind of plastic bags we might get from our local corner shop and things like that. But in this book, he ends up in the sea. There's his stripes in there. And he meets lots of different creatures along the way, including this turtle guy here. And there's a whale as well. He goes into the whale and then he comes out of the spout. That's a really cool picture to look at as well. But obviously that's not fun. Stanley should not be in the sea in the slightest. And it is all about how that one plastic bag comes into contact with so many different animals in the sea and how dangerous that can be. So we have it on here, the turtle, he can't breathe, but it's okay because there's this lovely boy at the end. I'm not going to tell you the ending, obviously, but he rescues him and he does something very interesting with Stanley and turns it into a positive thing. So that is Somebody Swallowed Stanley. Stanley the plastic bag. First thing on a Monday morning, what else do you need? Okay, next up is a short, it's kind of a short chapter book. This is the Sandy Cove Rescue. So this is all about the seaside. So we have 2 children in this book, as you can see them on the front cover there. They are part of a class that are learning about seaside habitats in school. And as part of that, the local kind of Marine Conservation Rescue Centre, visits the school for a good, like an assembly and a chat with them, and they learn all about what they're going to do, and they go and do a litter picking kind of project on the beach near where they live. So there they are, all ready to go with their teacher, and while they are there, they unfortunately, as you can see from the front cover, they find a seal that has got one of these ring pull things around his head, and he's stuck. But it's okay, because obviously, I'm not a spoiler, but slightly a spoiler, we have the local animal rescue team who are completely trained in everything like this, and they know what to do, and they know how to save the seal. So that just kind of highlights the impact that we have as humans on the seas in terms of the beach and the animals that live there, and that's things that we don't want. So that's a really nice chapter book for those more emerging readers, but there's some great pictures in there as well. And the best bit about it is we love books like this. It's very multicultural as well. So that is the Sandy Cove Rescue. And then my next three are more kind of your traditional story books, as it were. So we have next up is Nellie, the Chuck Ice and the Plastic Island. My favourite thing about Nellie is the fact that Nellie is a macaroni penguin, which I had to Google because macaroni penguins are real. They have little kind of yellow, exciting things going on their head that makes them look like macaroni for some reason like that. But in this story, I think this is the second or the third book that we have with Nellie in there. So this is Jeremy Strong. You might have come across Jeremy Strong before. And in this story, Nellie, she's travelling from the South Pole where she lives, and she's going to the North Pole. As you do, she goes via New York, which is really cool because you see the Statue of Liberty and things like that. But then on the way back, they come across, in the middle of the ocean, this massive plastic island. And it's one of these places, you hear about these kind of things on the news, where all the plastic has ended up gathered together and it's formed itself a little island. And now we're supposed to see islands like that in the ocean that are made of ice or made of like land. What the proper term for that is, I'm not quite sure. Real islands, but this is a man-made, man-caused plastic island. And as you can see from this picture here, the animals that they come across in the story are getting trapped. They're getting stuck in all the plastic, and that is very, very, very dangerous. What I like about this book the most is it's from a publisher called Barrington Stokes. So if you have any struggling or reluctant readers in your school or in your class or in your friendship group, then these books are brilliant, because I don't know if you can see it from here, but there is a special kind of font and there's a special colour of the page, and it's supposed to make it a lot easier for you to read if you either don't want to read or you struggle to read a little bit. And this is from the Little Gems series. Now, as you can see, compared to this book, it's nice and dinky, but there are some great stories in there. And obviously there's this one, and I love Nellie Chuck Ice, and I love that she's a macaroni penguin. What more do you need? Hey, so next up, these are more of our kind of very traditional novels. So maybe for upper Key Stage 2, Key Stage 3 readers, we have The Song of the Dolphin Boy by Elizabeth Laird. This is, believe it or not, set on the coast of England. We're in Cornwall, and there is a coral reef there. Who knew that this was a thing? But apparently it is. And what happens, I think I've got my two books mixed up actually. We're not in that. That's my next book, so I'm going to jump ahead and talk about this one first. So White Dolphin, this is set in Cornwall. There is a coral reef involved in this story, and there is also a white dolphin. Now we have two characters. We have Cara and we have Felix. At the beginning of the book, they don't get on. They really don't like each other. They're from very different backgrounds. Both of them have got their own kind of problems and their own histories and all these different things going on at home. Cara's mum in particular, she's gone missing. So when she sees the white dolphin, she feels like it's a message from her mum, and it's got lots of lovely themes in there as well. But we also have the fact that obviously the white dolphin, when they meet it and when they find it on the beach, it's injured, and they've decided that despite their differences, they're going to join together and make sure they save this dolphin and save the coral reef, because it's a lot about in the story about the impact that we have on the environment around us again, and what we can do to help. So that is The White Dolphin by Jill Lewis. And then I'm going to bring this book back, The Song of the Dolphin Boy. Again, we've got dolphins because this is something we do have in our seas around us as well. And my favourite bit about this book is that there are loads of facts in the back if you like a dolphin fact file, I suppose is the correct word for that. So you can get really into the story, but then you can also learn a lot about these animals that are one of the big features of our seas. So in this story, we're set in Scotland instead for this one, and it's all about a young boy called Finn. He's 11 years old and he's been to a birthday party recently, and there were loads of balloons let off, really exciting kind of celebration like we do with things like Chinese fire lanterns, and balloons at all different kinds of years. But this is about the impact of us doing something frivolous and really kind of fun, and something that we think is completely harmless and just looks beautiful and colourful, and how that can impact, because they start to find that the dolphins in the seas around the Scottish village that they're in on the coast, they start to end up with these balloons literally in their tummies. It's making them ill, and sometimes it's killing them as well, and that's really, really dangerous. So Finn's like, he went to this party and he thought it was a cool thing to do at the time, but he didn't realise the impact. And then he finds out that there's a new supermarket opening nearby, and that they're planning to let off 5,000 balloons into the air as a celebration, part of the opening. But he's like, no, this is the worst thing you can do. Look what it's done to the dolphins. I'm not going to tell you any more about it, because obviously you need to read it for yourself, but that is The Song of the Dolphin Boy. Hopefully you've liked the sound of those books. You can get hold of them, you can borrow them from us if you want to, but have a good read and try and find them and look at those marine issues and pick them apart, have a little talk about them. It's a really nice way to learn about them through a story and to have a good read at the same time. So thank you very much. I will now pass on to our next speaker.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Cassie. Some great books in there. I think I'm certainly going to try and get my hands on Somebody Swallowed Stanley, so I can read that later. We'll move on to our next speaker, and that's Rachel Wright, who's an education officer from the Marine Conservation Society. So I'll hand over to you, Rachel.
Awesome, thank you. And thank you, Cassie, for that. That was amazing. I loved it. I did not know about a macaroni penguin myself, I have to admit. So learned something new. And I have made a note of a lot of books there. I definitely want to read Song of the Dolphin Boy myself. So thank you. I really enjoyed that. That was great. But I'm just going to set my screen to share for you. Bear with me a second. Okay. Can we all see that okay? Yeah?
Yeah, that's fine.
Awesome, thank you. So yeah, my name's Rachel. I work for a charity called the Marine Conservation Society, and we are a UK-based charity working for healthier oceans. So this morning, I want to chat to you about some of the amazing animals that live in our ocean, and also we're going to ask some questions. So we're going to think about, what does the ocean do for us? How is the ocean being affected by climate change? And most importantly, what can we do to help? So we're going to start by taking a virtual dive and explore some of the amazing creatures that live around the shores here in the UK. As we watch a video, see how many of these amazing plants and animals you can name. So all of the creatures in that video live in the UK. We have over 9,000 species living in our waters with all sorts of weird and wonderful plants and animals. And learning about how amazing our underwater world is, it increases our passion for it and it helps drive our want to protect it. So it's a really important thing to do, just to learn about the amazing ocean. But maybe you aren't an animal lover. Maybe you're thinking, I live miles away from the sea, the ocean isn't important to me. So I want us to think about what does the ocean do for us and think about the amazing ways it helps all of us out, no matter where we live. So first of all, I want you to take a big breath in for me and out. Now, you have the trees on land to thank for the oxygen in that breath. Take another big breath for me, in and out. You have the ocean to thank for that breath. So the habitat in this picture here is called a seagrass bed. And like plants on land, plants in the ocean, like seagrass, photosynthesize and they produce oxygen through photosynthesis. 50 to 80% of the oxygen that we breathe comes from the ocean. So the ocean really is the planet's lungs and we can't afford for it to be unhealthy. So during photosynthesis, plants and algae also not only produce oxygen, but they store carbon. So this is really important in our fight against climate change. So greenhouse gas emissions from cars or planes or producing electricity and things like that, 90% of those emissions are carbon. So any habitat that can take up carbon from the atmosphere is really important. And in the UK, habitats like seagrass beds and like kelp beds in this picture here are really good at absorbing carbon. In fact, these habitats can take up and store more carbon per metre than forests on land. But it's not just the big plants like seagrass beds or the big algae like kelp, but tiny algae too, called phytoplankton, which you can see in this picture here. Now, 1 litre of seawater, which is about this much seawater, can contain thousands of phytoplankton, which are microscopic. And because there are so many phytoplankton across our ocean, they produce huge amounts of oxygen and absorb huge amounts of carbon too. So this is a salt marsh. It's another amazing coastal habitat that, along with seagrass beds and kelp beds, help to reduce wave energy. So as waves come to shore, these habitats slow down the force of waves hitting the coast. And this helps protect coastal homes and land from erosion. And maybe you like eating fish and chips, or maybe you like eating a fish finger sandwich. Most of the fish that we eat comes from the ocean. So if you want to carry on eating fish, then you need to make sure that the ocean is healthy. And as Alex mentioned at the start, 70% of the planet's surface is the ocean. So it plays a major role in the water cycle, like Alex mentioned, and in regulating our climate. So it's super important. And if you're lucky enough to have gone to the coast before, you'll also know how much fun it is and how important for our health and well-being it is as well. So hopefully you're thinking along the same lines as me now. You're thinking the ocean's a pretty cool place and it's pretty important. Now let's take a quick look at how climate change is affecting it. So we know that our planet is getting warmer, and that includes the ocean. And in fact, the ocean has absorbed 90% of the excess heat in the climate system. So it's kind of been hiding climate change for a long time because a lot of that heat has been absorbed by the ocean. So as Alex mentioned, when ice on land melts, that water then goes into the sea. And this is causing sea levels to rise across the globe, which then causes flooding to coastal communities and coastal habitats, and obviously can cause flooding further inland through rivers as well. Increasing sea temperatures is also causing plants and animals to move. So some plants and animals are moving further north to find cooler waters, and some are moving deeper to find cooler waters. And we might actually see some species start to die out because they might not be adapted to that new habitat. They might not be able to feed or reproduce properly in that new habitat. And rising sea temperatures are causing a decrease in the ocean's pH, and therefore the ocean is becoming more acidic, known as ocean acidification. So this is a problem for any animals that grow a calcium carbonate shell, because it's harder to grow their shell in acidic waters. So in tropical waters, you might have heard how coral reefs are being affected by climate change, and this is one of the reasons. But in waters closer to home, you've got mussels and other shellfish which are being affected because they can't grow their calcium carbonate shell. And then that incredible phytoplankton, those microscopic phytoplankton that we talked about earlier, they're also being affected as well. And then again, as Alex mentioned, climate change is causing an increase in the quantity and the size of storms. So these storms can damage fragile marine habitats like our important seagrass beds and our important kelp beds. So how do we reduce the pressure of climate change in our ocean so we can make sure that the ocean can carry on doing the wonderful things that it does? What we need to do is we need to decarbonise, we need to reduce the amount of carbon emissions coming from lots of the activities that we do. So how we produce electricity, in how we transport things in the ocean, we can think about fishing and how we can reduce the carbon from that and reduce the impact that has on the ocean. And there's lots and lots of ways that the government and businesses can help to do this. But I want to finish by thinking about actions that you can take, because hopefully now you are inspired to protect the ocean because of the many wonderful things it does for us as humans, because it helps to reduce climate change, which is super important, by storing carbon, and because of the many wonderful creatures that live in there, like we saw in the video at the start. So you don't need to live by the sea to protect it, and that's a really important thing to remember. So one thing you could do is cut down on how much single-use plastic you use. So this helps reduce the amount of plastic that ends up in our sea, either through the drains, like Alex mentioned, or down through the rivers. And it helps to reduce the carbon emissions that are being produced when making plastic in the first place as well. Now, it's really important to kind of keep alive your passion for nature. And if you don't live by the sea, then think about how nature around you as well inspires you. So what you could do is create a nature space at school or at home to stay connected to nature. If you haven't already got a sustainability group at school, then why not set one up, and you can discuss with your fellow students and your fellow teachers how you can make your school a greener place. We run a litter survey called Source to Sea. So it's all about how litter from the source can end up in the sea. So litter that can be dropped in the Midlands could end up at the sea. So we need to think about picking litter up not only on beaches but everywhere. So as a school group, you could help us out by collecting vital data on what type of pollution is littering our environment. You pick it up, you record that data, and then you share the data with us, and that helps to contribute to citizen science. And your school is a big part of your local community, so you have a great chance to showcase the amazing work that you do. So if you do a litter pick, let people know about it and help inspire people in your community to look after nature too. And another thing that you could do is organise events to help raise money for marine conservation, like these two guys here who did lots of different paintings as a way of helping to raise some money. So thank you so much for listening today. We've got loads of information on our website and on our social media channels as well if you want to stay inspired And a quick call out to teachers. We run lots of free education sessions. So if you're interested in them, our website is there, our email address is there. Have a look. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Rachel. That certainly highlights the impact that climate change can have on our oceans and what we can do to reduce that, to protect biodiversity and ultimately ourselves. I want to say a massive thank you to all of our wonderful speakers today. Quick round of applause. Brilliant. Thank you. So we'll start thinking about what's happening next on Climate Action Fortnight. And tomorrow, on Tuesday, the 17th of November, we have our school grounds topic, and we will be hearing from Samantha Wood, who works for the Conservation Volunteers, or TCV. We've got Martha Rose from Leicestershire and Rutland Wildlife Trust, and we've got Mary Jackson from Learning Through Landscapes. And the activities will be designing your own ideal playground, which I would love to do, and I might join in with that one. We've also got 8 easy mini beast habitats that you can make and put in your school grounds. As you will know, we have a quiz that's running through the entire fortnight, and we have questions for each day. If you would like to enter, get in contact with your teacher. They'll be able to print you off the entire list, and then you'll be able to enter them at the end of this week. So the questions for today are: number 1, what is the name of water pollution that goes into the sea? Is it A, rubbish, B, trash, C, sewerage? Question number 2, this has come up in a couple of our presentations today. Plastic has been found in what percentage of marine turtles? Is it A, 0%, B, 50%, or C, 100%? And then finally, question number 3, how far is it from Leicester to the sea? So A, 45 miles, B, 69 miles, or C, 112 miles? So yeah, if you might need to do a bit of research on those, but we'll on the extranet, you'll be able to find the entry form. So we'd love to hear what you've been up to during Climate Action Fortnight, and these are all the ways that you can contact us. We've got all of our social media channels, and this recording will go up onto YouTube as well, and you'll find all the recordings from last week as well. Any activities you can find on our extranet page, which is schools.leicester.gov.uk/eco-schools. And if you'd like to send us an email, it's eco-schools@leicester.gov.uk. Yes, that's it for today. Once again, thank you for our speakers, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye-bye.